What's up, wizards? It's time for a impromptu Rule Zero conversation. I'm Sean, and this week, well, we're still going to release a video on Sunday detailing my favorite top 10 cards in Duskmourn that are off the beaten path. I want to add value and something useful to folks that a lot of the big channels may not be able to cover just because they're kind of almost required to cover the biggest, splashiest cards for Commander. And I think there are a lot of little hidden gems and things right underneath the surface that are super valuable, fun, maybe cheaper to buy initially. And so I hope you like that. But because of the nutso bannings that got dropped, and I say nutso in that it is a seismic event, not that I disagree with them, I want to talk with you all about a few bullet points that I've written down here in a natural, peaceful sort of setting. This is my backyard. There's a creek that flows by. You may hear dogs and crows and other creatures, and also vehicles that drive by because I don't live that far away from a road. But I watch a D&D channel called Bob the World Builder, and he always does his videos inside of like parks and stuff like that with a little microphone, and I love that kind of. So for impromptu videos, I may do them out here. It's a lot nicer. So first of all, let's talk about the bannings, okay? You know hopefully what they are by now. I imagine it's a seismic shift. So Dockside Extortionist, Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, and Nadu Winged Wisdom. One of those is not like the others. Nadu, as much as I love him in Derevi Bird Tribal, a king amongst birds, I can understand why the bird is gone. And so I'm okay with that. But let's talk about the other three and the community's response. So Josh Lee Kwai ran a poll 24 hours right after the bannings. Do you agree with these bannings? 50% of the community out of like 19,000 almost votes came up and said yes. 50% said no. The community split. If you're interacting with folks online, you've probably seen some very hot and heavy discussions. I would urge, first, empathy. Even if you agree with these bannings, it is not helpful, I think, to tell folks, go play a different format. You shouldn't invest in cardboard. A lot of other sort of pithy sayings. Those might sound good in sound bites, but they're kind of cruel and not empathic of the pain that some people are feeling, because these cards were very much a surprise to be banned. Even if you felt personally that these cards were on the watch list, and even 4 years ago, Sheldon Minery, when he discussed Jeweled Lotus on Star City Games for his deck updates that he did for every single set that came out, even then he said it was a mistake and that the rules committee was watching it, but because of pandemic and his cancer and all sorts of other things came in between that I have no idea about, that kind of fell under the radar. It felt safe to a lot of people to pick up the Jeweled Lotuses. One of the artists for the Jeweled Lotus, Elena Danner, I believe is how her pronunciation is. I met her at Gen Con in 2022, I guess. Wonderful person, but she signed so many people's Jeweled Lotuses over the years. It was like a treasured possession, a really blingy, cool card for a lot of people to play, even though I personally never owned one, and have been in a camp that is controversial at times, in which I've told my friend group, I honestly don't think it's that good, because I was basing that off of like price to effectiveness ratio. Do I understand that it was good in some circumstances? Yeah. $100 good? Not even close. It's in effect a ritual. It can be busted in artifact decks, right? But mostly it's a ritual. So, that said, where am I at? Did I lose a lot of value myself? No. I had one Dockside Extortionist. It was in a Calamity Galloping Inferno deck. And probably, in my opinion, was one of the most boring cards in the deck. I couldn't even make use of making a lot of treasures effectively in that deck. It's not like I was casting big X spells or anything like that. It was just an ETB creature that was funny when it came in, and sure, it made a lot of mana, which was nice, but it was in no way a linchpin, and I'm not sad. I got it in a precon, so I didn't really spend buku bucks to buy one. Mana Crypt, I pulled out of a pack once. I sold that at like $150 at some point. And Jeweled Lotus I've never owned because I didn't really like it. So, now, point 2. The RC is steadfast. They are saying that this decision, they released an update, this decision is sticking. It is not going to change. I'm sorry for the background noise. Like I said, I live close to a road, and even at this time, for some reason, it's very busy. I don't know why. But the RC is steadfast. They're not going to change this decision. They have no plans of doing so. They're as empathic as they can be, which to some of you may feel like a jab, but they're in a tough position. And I think they made a decision after much, much consternation. They didn't willy-nilly it. It wasn't in response to recent CDH rumblings. It wasn't in response to anything recent. It was over a year of them discussing it, talking with Wizards. And they admit that they could have been better about forewarning people in a way, although they're uncertain how to do so effectively, in that there's a lot of casual players who are not terminally online. And so how do you even begin to try and warn those people that there may be a ban incoming? I think it would catch them off guard as well. Also, personally, like, I'm friends with a game store owner, and she lost an incredible amount of potential revenue, right? There's a red Mana Crypt, which is like a $3,000 card from what I understand, or was a $3,000 card sitting in a case, waiting to be sold. I have no idea how much was paid for these things, but I can't imagine it was cheap. And a game store is an operation that runs on a shoestring. Like, this person paid all of her employees more than she was making for years, and still does, I think, and then really just gets by, but does right by a lot of people. So I understand the pain in that, and I think folks should empathize with that a good deal more if they are not already. The places where you get to play Magic depend on these kind of high dollar singles to be a main source of revenue. Do I think that Wizards should have continued printing them in such a way that they became $100 staples? That's where I disagree with Wizards wholeheartedly. I think the rules committee makes bannings based on things outside of price. I think that's fine. They have to care about the health of the format, and the way that they care is because it's casual to them, and they want to keep it casual, want to keep the speed down. But Wizards sucking every little penny, every bit of monetary worth out of, reprint equity, quote unquote. The ability to sell these cards in packs and make them into like chase mythics. Oh, that's on them. And there's a part of me that has a feeling I'm really glad the RC made this move, because 2 of the cards they targeted, well, 3 with Nadu, but who's thinking about Nadu right now, were cards designed specifically for Commander. And I think that is overall a bad trend in Magic. I think Magic is at its best, and I've said this before, when it focuses only on Standard, and then the cards filter naturally into other formats. But I guess we're past that point in history now. It feels like the Rosewaters of the world, they're just going to keep building for their most popular format. And I disagree with Mark Rosewater on a few things. I think he's a genuinely beautiful soul, and a good guy, and cares a lot, and has a hell of a lot more knowledge than I do about game design. But where I disagree with him often is the idea that what sells is right. I don't think that's a metric that's ever been correct throughout human history. The Ford Pinto sold, that didn't make it right that it blew up on people later, and that Ford didn't want to take it off the market because they actually calculated how much it would cost to take it off the market and recall everyone over the amount that they would have to settle with people outside of courts and such to kind of cover up the fact that it was blowing up on people. Like, when we start to think about like money making things right, we are so far gone off of the path of being a human being that I can't listen to any of those arguments. So, neither here nor there. Before I get into my feelings, let me look down at my list. What are our options? That was the whole point of bringing up that the RC is steadfast. They're not going to change this. They're not going to unban the card anytime soon. So I have several opinions. One, I think if you like these cards, and I think a lot of people do, and I have friends who do, you have to start trying to either pushing for a CEDH rules committee, one that is governed by people who are caring, thoughtful, community selected, and that organization could unban, and they could also rise the monetary value of these cards back up to a point that is probably healthy, such as cards like Draneth Magistrate, which only sees CEDH play and is currently like a $25 rare. So there can be a lot of value in those cards still if CEDH, which is a tournament format now, would take control of its own ship and not be tethered to a rules committee that cares distinctly about casual play. And I think they've really made that clear with this ban announcement, that they care a lot about casual play and keeping things a little slower, in their own words. So yeah, I think there needs to be a split. Two, for people who are just playing not in tournaments, not wanting to be beholden to a CEDH rules committee, or maybe so for those folks who just want to play in their shop but they still want to play with these cards, my guess is that you're going to have like-minded individuals in that shop who also want to play those cards. And I have to say this may be tough for some of those players to swallow. Sometimes casual players have had to do a lot of work to try and cultivate a more casual format in their shop. For instance, my group, we've made, theme decks to try and lower the power of things. We've made what we call Rule 7 decks, and we did a whole video on that early on in our podcast, where we took out a lot of cards and had our own self-policed ban list of cards that we felt were too powerful. People who are interested in high-powered casual, who want to play Mana Crypt and stuff, can still Rule 0 those cards in, but it will take work and some organization. And if that's not something that y'all want to do, that's fine, right? It's your game. You do what you need to do, but don't act like it's more work to do that than casual players have been doing all this time. Casual players have been constantly trying to power down their Magic games through rules, themes, self-bans. It's a lot of work to do that. It's exhausting, frankly. And so I think that's why a lot of casual players, and me included, are probably okay with these bans, because one less Rule 0 type of step, one less pre-game conversation that I have to have about, like, let's not play Mana Crypt or Fast Mana in these games, guys. Thank goodness. I'm okay with that. Now it's done for me. So, lastly, if you are a high-powered casual player, I do empathize, and I won't be the kind of person who is like, oh, you shouldn't have made that investment. I think that's nonsense. And I'll post a link in the description below from DJ Jumbo Commander, who I think is a high-powered casual enjoyer, and I think he hit the nail on the head as far as like describing why those players really enjoy that kind of gameplay. And I think there should be a place for that gameplay. I just don't know the correct way for that to happen, nor do I think I'm the guy who should come up with it, because I care a lot more about casual play, and that's where a lot of my knowledge comes in. Lastly, I do want to share a story, and this involves two different friends. One who's extremely casual, who makes like $50 budget decks often, and one who's extremely high-powered casual. And then me, I tend to make middling or high-powered casual decks myself. But it involves this argument that the only reason, quote-unquote, that I used cards like Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus was to get out my really expensive commander. I think that argument falls on deaf ears. And the reason I think that is because when I've seen Mana Crypts played, they do not tend to power out the 7-power commander immediately. What they tend to power out are extremely broken spells turns earlier before than they should be coming out. And here's my example. Anecdotal, take it for what you will, but it sticks out distinctly in my memory. And so we have those games in Magic in our lives where we're kind of like, I remember that one forever. That I felt that one in my spirit. I sat down with an Atla Palani deck. Atla Palani can be a very busted commander. This one was a theme deck based around literal eggs. So I played like these mana rocks that are eggs that are stupid and they're bad. They're not good cards. I played chickens from unsets in the deck. And the idea is Atla Palani makes eggs. She can tap to hatch the egg. 1 out of 20, 5% of the times that the egg hatched, a horrific Eldrazi would come out. I believe it was Ulamog at the time, the original Ulamog. And 19 out of 20 times, or 95% of the time, it would be a chicken, a dinosaur, or a bird. Things that come out of eggs. It was a bad deck. It was slow. Like I said, I was using these mana rocks that were bad, but I was also using like Dingus Egg and Ruck Egg and all kinds of other cards that were just Rock Egg, Dragon Egg. Like, these cards are not good. So, turn 1, my friend sits across the table, and I won't name him in case he doesn't want to be called out, but I think he might know who he is if he listens to this description, and I think he does listen to the podcast sometimes. He's playing a Nicol Bolas deck. It is, I don't remember if it's the 4-mana one, or if it's the OG old Nicol Bolas from Legends. Either way, my other friend Jude is sitting down at the table, and he has a budget deck. It's a green deck. I can't remember what it was at this point. Turn 1, the Nicol Bolas player goes. They play an island and Mana Crypt. And I think another Mana Rock too, but I'm not 100% sure. Passes. We all play a land. I don't think any of us are able to ramp at that point. Comes back around. Turn 2, that player with the high-powered Mana Rock, Mana Crypt start, plays another blue producing source and casts Bribery on me, a 5-mana spell that can steal a creature out of my deck and put it into play on his side of the battlefield. And we have 1 mana each person. I did a thing that I do not like doing in games. I just don't like it. I think if you are going to scoop, you should do so at sorcery speed 99% of the time. However, in that moment, I made the calculation, if this Bribery player who just got out a turn 2 Bribery in my deck, while we're both at 1 mana, pulls the Ulamog with Annihilator 4, or Annihilator 2, I can't remember what the Ulamog is, either way, it's horrific. out of my deck, we have zero ability to interact with that powerful of a spell at this point in the game. So I instant speed scooped. The player, he's a friend, but I don't think he loved that. He's kind of miffed by it. And I get it, right? Instant speed scoops are, it's like, oh, I was about to do my thing. And I don't know if he realized what my deck was, but it was a joke deck, right? With only one singular creature that's horrific. And so he was going to be able to get that creature out and just raffle stomp the table. Some of you might say, well, that's a funny story, right? But I was trying to think, like, if I don't pull out of this game and scoop right now, Jude has zero chance in this game. He can attack me, annihilate my lands. I don't have any lands anymore. Attacks Jude, annihilate his lands. He doesn't have any lands anymore. And then it's just over. And it's just sitting there waiting to be killed 10 points of damage at a time, or 12, or whatever the old Ulamog is. So, I instant speed scooped. I don't think it helped Jude to win that game regardless, because he already had all this mana out, right? It's like you've got a 6-7 mana advantage, even with that big old creature out there. So I leave you with that story only because I think it perfectly exemplifies the reason that the community at large will be okay not seeing these cards in play. They lead to horrifically unbalanced and frankly unfun games. There's always a light side to this, right? Like, people can play those cards saying, well, I've only ever used it to cast my 7-8 mana commander. Maybe that's true. It's just not what I've seen from my experience. But going forward, be joyful, be empathetic, be whatever you need to be, as long as you're not being cruel and mean to others. This is a very split, divisive decision in the community, and I hope that you can just be the best person you can be when talking to others about it. And until then, remember, in Magic, there's no problem that a Rule 0 conversation cannot solve.